I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, y'all. Again, it is February 2nd, 2022. It is 12:07 in the great Kitsap County. You know what time it is. On Wednesdays, it is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces with Mark Boatwright-Frost. How are you doing today, Mark?
Doing wonderful. How about you, Marwan?
You know what? It is an exciting day for sure. It's a productive day, and that just jazzes me up.
I get that.
I'm feeling really good. We talked last week, and you were working on your annual summary, and so that's what we're going to get into today. So definitely excited about that. I've been reviewing that document, and I've got plenty of questions. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. As I'm pulling that up, though, anything current that's happened in the last week that you can just talk about briefly that we should be on our radar, anything that's geopolitical or something even more local.
Well, geopolitical, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and I wonder what that's going to bring. The most recent thing I'm thinking about in terms of resiliency is the fact that the East Coast from Texas to Maine is getting hit right now with a second major storm that's going to include a lot of ice, and one can't help but think about Texas after last year. And all of the reports saying that they really haven't addressed the problems. So my heart goes out to my friends in Texas. I hope things go well for you.
I was just watching something this morning. I believe it was the governor and some other political figure in Texas promising that it wasn't going to be like last year, and that the grid was ready and they had all this reserve power in place. I'm definitely concerned for them down there for sure. And Mark, the thing that catches me too is they don't seem to they seem still so reactionary and not proactive, right? Like you had this disaster last year. Okay, it was a freak snowstorm. There's issues that needed to be addressed. We can talk about who was wrong, right? Whatever. That's neither here nor there. What are you going to do so that it doesn't happen again? And while I don't know the particulars on what they've done, in the handling of COVID and some of the other things that we've seen, it just seems like many in the political world are still so very reactionary and not proactive.
Yeah, it's really okay. So let's separate this out again. There's
Sure.
the political world, and then there's the government,
Mm-hmm.
and they're two completely separate entities.
But talk about that. I think that's important for people to understand.
Okay, so politicians make laws. Okay, that's their job, and their job is supposed to look forward and make laws. Not that we've seen a lot of that happening in the last like 30 or 40 years, but that's their job, is to make laws and to manage things. And so we're talking about the congressional side, the House, the representative side of government. The Supreme Court is supposed to be a body that figures out if the laws are constitutionally match the Constitution or not. Yes or no. It's kind of that. And then the executive branch is supposed to manage the government. So it's really the president and the cabinet that are supposed to manage the government. But being political appointees and changing every 8 years, the government really manages itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not proactive. It's not designed to be proactive. It's designed to be reactive and create stability. And you got to start thinking about government that way, because if you expect it to change things, my really good friend of mine when I was a kid said, happiness is about having your expectations met. So therefore, being happy is about setting your expectations appropriately. If you want to be pissed off all the time, keep believing the government is going to proactively change things for the better. I prefer not to be angry.
Well, that's interesting. I think that really is a big part of, a seminal piece of what we're going to talk about today.
It certainly informs it.
And the question is how do we begin to start to change that so we can be a more productive, uh, a nation, and really, a nation of serving the people.
Well, I don't know if you've got the actual PDF. So you see the very first picture on the PDF.
Here it is.
We the people. Very first line of the Constitution of the United States. And yet we forget the we the people part, and we expect the representatives of the people who don't really represent us any longer. And I'm happy to take any arguments that they do, but they don't really represent us anymore, and we expect them to change things for us. Can you imagine the chaos about that? For let's just say Representative X from state Y. Doesn't matter whether it's Republican or Democrat or Independent. Does not matter. Can you imagine how many letters he gets that and want conflicting things to happen on any given day, or emails or whatever, messages, whatever? They literally have thousands of competing emails, all wanting something different.
Right.
Make a decision about what the people want in that kind of environment. And I'm not excusing them. I'm not being an apologist for them. I'm just talking about the reality of their lives. Doesn't matter how good your staff is or how good you are. When you've got 1,000 people wanting X and 1,000 people wanting Y, how do you make the decision which one to help or pursue?
That brings up a question. And when I'm working with my group, when I'm working with students, or when instructors are working with me and I'm the student, we'll have this period of brainstorming, right? And they'll say there's no stupid idea, no stupid question. And listening to you speak, we are the most advanced in history. We're the most powerful, the richest nation in the history of mankind. And while our voting process is riddled with issues and has been politicized, I believe that we have the infrastructure. If we're gonna change this, wouldn't it be a good idea, or would it be something to consider, that we don't just vote for the president of the United States in mass, but we vote for everything in mass? I mean, people can vote for anything right now. Your favorite team or your favorite color, what new M&M you want in the bag. There's infrastructures that are set for that, and so to get it to the people and not the lobbyists, put it back in the hands of each individual, give everyone a vote and say, hey, this is what we want to do in regards to this aspect of climate change, and let everyone vote and then go forward from that. What's your thoughts on that? Is that crazy?
No, it's something I would like to see happen. The problem with that, and okay, I don't mean to say the problem with that, but there's a problem with that.
No, okay, this just popped into my head. So,
and so, okay, wow, I really wasn't going to get into electoral politics here, but let's talk about it a little bit, because understanding how it works is important.
yes.
We have a two-party system. This is how it breaks down, and the numbers are rough. Don't hold me to them. The Democrats right now represent about somewhere between 28 and 29% of registered voters. Republicans somewhere between 24 and 26. All other registered voters are independent or do not identify with a party. All others. So we're talking 40 some odd percent. I think it was 46% last I looked, of voters in this country do not identify with Republican or Democrat. Yet, all of the decisions about who we get to vote for, what we get to vote for, are given to us by the two parties. So we can't vote for what we want to vote for until we do something about the party system. And I don't know what that looks like. Please trust me. I'm not saying we need to throw them all out. But, some of me says that I'd like to throw them all out and start from scratch. But when 46% of the people aren't being represented by either of the two parties that are in charge of everything, we have a problem.
No, absolutely. But I just wonder sometimes if we make the solution more difficult than it needs to be, and sometimes you need to try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't, modify it and then chuck it out. But to
When
me,
we receive new information, we need to do things differently based on the new information. Except as a people, we don't do that.
right. And so what I'm saying is we're probably not going to dismantle parties immediately. It might be easier to implement a situation where everyone can vote, one time. There's some kind of checks and balances that allows that to happen. They already do that now. Like you got March Madness. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of where this is already happening. And then, the issue would be, to me, it would be more equitable. Every state, like even here in
Agree.
Washington, we have plenty of red counties, right? And that would be more representative of the individuals that live where they live, and they can actually have their voices heard. And that will disaggregate some of the power structure of just either being a Democrat or Republican options that are put forth by the lobbyists. Not to say that lobbying wouldn't go away; it would still exist, but it would decrease. I would believe significantly. Not a perfect system, but a more perfect.
And I'm for anything. I am for anything that gets the people to have more voice. You were mentioning earlier that we already have a framework in this country that is for the people. The problem is that we've allowed the political side of the house to take control of how that is, and equitable isn't in their interest.
Mm.
Okay. Um, Having the people have a voice isn't in their best interest, as we've seen by how they represent us, because they are supposed to be representing the people. But we don't really have true representation anymore. We have special interests on top of special interests. And I think it's more complex. And I would definitely like to spend a session getting into this with you,
Yeah,
because it's an interesting discussion. For the benefit of what we're talking about today, let's just say that our system doesn't represent us. It doesn't put things in place that we need to put in place. And it's up to us, we the people, to come together as was envisioned in the Constitution of the United States, and bring pressure to bear to change the systems that do not support us. If we start with that premise, then we can have a discussion about what the year-end update's about.
got you. All right, so let's jump into this year-end update. This is on the Facebook page now. Is that correct? And on the website?
There's a link to it on the Facebook page. There is definitely a link on our website. It is also on Medium. So if you go to Medium and look up my name, you'll find articles written by me, and I have posted the year-end update there.
So there's a lot of places that you can get access to this document. I've put the RESECO website down in the chat for you. And as you can see here, this is the year-end update. Oops, my mouse is a little sensitive. And nice table of contents here. Goes over the projects, just kind of skipping down, the innovation for all. We'll touch on some of these things: food for all, power for all. I know you've added some more: health for all, education, economy for all, which is awesome. So I enjoy seeing that there. And so we're going to just kind of get into it here. You can see the leadership here, and as it's set, and this summary. I don't know if you have it open on your end or not.
I do, as a matter of fact.
Do you want to just kind of just go over the quick summary to go ahead and frame our discussion, and then I'll start asking questions?
Yeah, first of all, this seems like a lot in this document. I understand that, so I put in an introductory piece that states that while we've had many pieces of the puzzle, and again, I want to reiterate that our visualization of how we look at this project is as a jigsaw puzzle, except we don't know what the picture is. So we have spent several years putting the edges around the side. Now, the reason that we put this summary together and there's so much in it is because we've known a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that fit in the edges, but this year, a lot of them became far more clear. And maybe we found the courage to start saying what actually needs to be addressed. And when you think about the fact that this is a human-driven project, And it's driven by people talking to each other and putting politics, religion, all divisive issues aside, and talking about what's important to you as a human being, what's important to your family, and keeping the focus on those things. Maybe we can find pieces of the puzzle that we can add that would give us a more human-centric future. So we have core questions that everybody asks us, like, why is this necessary? So, but even before I get to that question, I'm going to ask you a question, Marwan,
Sure.
because I did watching a video the other day. I found a tool called Google Trends,
Mm-hmm.
and I went through the Google Trends last night. I was looking at various search terms and searches for videos over the last year, and I put in, of course, resilience because it's close to my heart. And there's this little red line at the bottom of the thing that barely anybody has seen. But the primary question on resilience is, what is resilience? So you're on our board. We talk about this every week. So I'm going to pose the question to you. Tell people what resilience is.
So it's interesting that you asked me this question. I actually went on a rant on a podcast a couple of weeks ago about resiliency. So I'm gonna give that same answer again, and then I'll connect it to RESECO. The My rant was centered around the misnomer of what resiliency really means. And we tend to say that we are resilient when in actuality, many times we're just surviving. You know, we say, "Oh, you're so resilient. You've been through so much and you're still here." And it's like, well, that's not necessarily resiliency. That's that person survived. And I think of many of the things that we have going on here in our communities in regards to food and water and health and everything else, right? We're not being resilient. We're just in survival mode, doing the best that we can. That it would be more like saying we're sustainable, we're maintaining, we may even be losing ground. And so resiliency gets used in a way where, well, what's beyond resiliency, and what should anyone shoot toward beyond that if you're telling them they're already resilient when they're not really being resilient. Um, and so to me, I think it gives people a false sense of security, a false sense of self-esteem, hope of what their situation is, whether it's their personal life or how they interact with the world or the issues that are around them. So for me, resiliency is going past survival mode, going past, sustainability, going past, we made it another day, and that was enough, right? Well, there are going to be days where it's, look, I got up today, I'm here another day, I'm not 100%, right? That's not resiliency, that's survival. And that's good. Survival is important. Sustaining that is, and stabilization is important so that you can begin to work on being resilient. But we really need to be clear as to what resilience is, and then we need to actively work toward resilience and move through survival, sustainability into that avenue. And so the way that I would connect that is, it doesn't matter whether it's something that I'm going through as an individual, as I suffer through poverty or childhood adverse childhood experiences, whatever those things are. I need to move through that scale, moving into resilience. I need to define what that is, have some goals, have an idea of what that looks like tangibly, and then build that scaffolding to get myself there or get my community there. So that is my answer.
Okay, and then I'm going to throw one more question at you. An add-on question is, can you
Sure.
do it alone?
No, absolutely not. And I was just having this conversation with someone the other day. We were talking about independence and codependence. And I was asking this person, did they know what interdependence was? And they actually had never heard of it before, which surprised me because of the circles that this individual is in. Those are one of the, I don't want to call it a trope, but that's one of the things that they talk about, right? A lot of times you want to be interdependent. You cannot do it by yourself. None of us are independent. These huge corporations and companies are not independent, right? They get tax breaks and tax credits and all kinds of bennies and whatnot. You think about Walmart, who's multi-billion-dollar business, but then their workers are on SNAP benefits, right? So they're not independent. They're very much codependent on the government. Interdependence is working together for mutual benefit, right? So we're going to thrive together to better. We're going to thrive better together than we would alone. But I'm not just so dependent on you that I can't function without you. We're going to use our knowledge, skills, and abilities. We're going to merge those synergies so that we can ascertain resiliency. So that is how I will answer that.
Excellent. So that is the most asked question, according to Google Trends, when dealing with resilience. People want to know, what is it? Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting that considering how few views it gets compared to other things, and I will point out that survival gets exponentially more looks than resilience does. Exponentially. The chart, it was actually amazing. I looked at resilience, sustainability, survival, and I can't remember the other two things I looked at, but you could compare them in a graph, in a line chart, and survival was looked at 100 times more than sustainability was.
And without looking at that data, I would assume that that's because many of us are in survival mode, whether it's our health, whether it's our housing security or insecurity, if you will, our food insecurity, job insecurity, wage insecurity, the list goes on and on. We're in survival mode in so many aspects of our lives that there's no point to look at resiliency. We're still trying to fit. We're treading water. If we stop, we drown.
We talk about survival and we talk about poverty.
Yeah.
But I'm, as you know, I'm in the process of rewriting the webpage, or adding a section to the webpage for the Innovation for All. And one of the things I was looking at was shelter. And I've been reading an enormous amount of documents on shelter and on positives for shelter. And I read an article this morning, that didn't shock me, but it made me sit back a little bit and think. It said that people who are making 6 figures are living paycheck to paycheck. And we're talking about percentiles in the 40 to 50 percentile.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
People who are making 6 figures in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. A recent study came out, I think 2018 study came out, saying that people, and it was over 50% of the people in this country who work, could not handle a $400 emergency situation without selling something or taking out a loan. Think about that. 50% of our country, 150 million people. We and I don't even know what the numbers are anymore, because I haven't seen them produced and or covered by the media in however long. But we used to hiccup at 4% unemployment. Mm-hmm. It's just not 4% anymore. And now we're just not being told the numbers. It's not being reported anymore. So we aren't resilient. The systems that support us aren't resilient. And we need to talk about how to get them resilient. So I think we covered the first question on the core questions, which is, why is this necessary? Mm-hmm. We aren't resilient. If we can't survive a $400 emergency situation, we aren't resilient. Because how many emergency situations do you know that stop at $400?
It just off the top of my head, car repair, health, something breaks in the house. It may not be an emergency, but it may be a requirement for your child. Yeah, $400 comes pretty quick.
Yep.
And we just did an auto repair on one of our vans, and it was $1,000. So
yeah,
2.5 times. That you don't have 400, you need $1,000. Okay.
Yeah.
And we feel calls like this every day. I can't pay for this, I can't pay for that. Pet emergencies. There's so many different things. Continue. I'm sorry.
No, it's absolutely true, and I think we can agree that just shows that we aren't resilient. Mm-hmm. We're not even sustaining.
Right.
We are in fact losing ground, and that's without adding anything to it, other than the way we are governed and the way that we are employed and the way that our system works. So I think that answered question number two. What's wrong with the framework we have?
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question that I came up with today while writing the page on shelter. I said, have you ever asked yourself, and this is for the entire audience, have you ever asked yourself when we got to the point where human beings didn't matter? And the framing for this question is, we make money, our culture and our cultural framework, current cultural framework, makes money on things people need to survive. Let's talk about the top three of those: water, food, shelter. Without those, we're pretty much toast. Okay, so we look at homelessness. We want it to go away. The city and Napa right now, according to something I read on Facebook earlier, which means it's a Facebook meme or Facebook statement, so you don't know if it's true or not, are in the process of clearing a homeless camp up behind Napa off of 303 in
Okay.
Bremerton.
Mm-hmm.
Make it go away, hide it, move it, but don't address the problem because they can't address the problem. It's too big for them.
Well, you know what? To that end, uh, my team got sick. They all got the bug a couple weeks ago, so I had to come off the bench and get in there and pick up the slack. And while I was there on the weekend, and I was like, oh, over in front of the weld shop, catty corner from our building or right across sideways, like 10 folks that are homeless, tents and whatnot. Across the street, in front of the parking garage, there's one person that's in the alcove on the outside. There was someone right outside C Film, and then on the side of our building where Allstate is, on the far end of us, were three or four more people, and they were there both on Saturday and Sunday. And then all of a sudden, I said, you know what? Let me just drive downtown last night and just see if these people are there. And they weren't. But what was there now there fencing everywhere. So in between the flower shop down there is now a fence. And so you cannot walk down that alleyway. You can come into their parking lot. On the other side, the rescue mission building, which is empty now, has a fence from their back of their building all the way to the street, and the alley has a fence in the middle of it so that pedestrians can't walk through that alley in that way. So they're creating barriers, but what are we doing to address the problem of the issue of people not having housing? So
We aren't.
that is my critique. I mean, you can put up all the fences you want. It's not going to solve the issue. And more of us, as you said, we're not sustaining, we're falling backwards. More of us are becoming homeless. More of us are having to downsize, as you can tell from all of the storage units that are being erected all over Kitsap County. So yeah,
Yep.
that's my observation in real time.
Yep. So here's what I actually wrote. Have you ever asked the question, how is it we, as a people, have let the core necessities of our life become the basis of profit for a few?
Hmm.
How is that? How is it that we've done that? If you've never answered the question, it is a question we ask ourselves every day at Resilient Ecosystems. It is not a pointless question. It is a question that can open the door to understanding where our cultural framework went wrong. How many people, I wonder, understand what the commodities market is?
Probably not many.
It's where we gamble on the price of our food and the harvests. I wonder how many people know how many tons of food are dumped at the border between Mexico and the United States, and recently on the other side of the Cascades here in Washington State, because of port disputes or price changes,
Wow.
where they called the driver and said, yeah, prices dropped, just dump the food on the border and drive back. That happens all the time, creating an enormous amount of food waste, not to mention the health hazards, I assume, that go with the fact that you've got the flies and everything else that happen when you have rotting food on the side of the road. This happens all the time. So, food being treated as a commodity, yet food is one of the things we need to survive. And then there's water and our inability to manage water. Flint, Michigan, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, example after example after the example of how we waste water. And we talked about that a few days ago or a couple of weeks ago. So and then real estate, let's look at the fact that we can't seem to manage to put in affordable housing. Why is that? It's a simple math equation. Cities and counties have very little revenue stream in the way of revenue stream, and they have a lot of responsibilities. Federal government isn't doling out as many dollars as they were a decade ago, even a year ago. It's shrinking. It's never shrinking number. So there's less money for states, less money for counties, less money for cities. The only reliable income a city has is development and property taxes. So is it any wonder that they're in a rush to pave the county and put up hundreds and hundreds of houses? We say we need more houses, yet there are hundreds of houses from the mortgage debacle still owned by the bank.
Right.
We are unwilling to do things that are not politically expedient. And the only way to change that is for people to come together and help our representative government decide to do better things.
You posed the question earlier: is how do we get here? And I believe the answer is you have this structure that is set, and then it is dangled as a carrot in front of the American people as something to achieve, right? The American dream. So you too can be, Bill Gates or whoever, and maybe not that, but the next rung down, and you can have, live this life of excess and insecurity financially, and so that's what everyone is shooting toward, and then we're bombarded from a social media perspective, and culturally that's what we value, right? The accumulation of things, and you want to monetize
That's
and
what we've been taught to value.
yeah, and build profit off of things that shouldn't be profitable.
But if we talk to each other and we actually realize what is likely to give us security and a better life and resilience, you realize it's not that.
But I think that's where the question becomes, right? Because if I'm a person, and I hear this a lot, right? Hey, look, I went to school, I went to college, I got a good job, I worked as a kid, and I went through, I took my lumps, and I put in the time, I worked hard, I'm on this job 20 years, I bought a home, I invested, I saved my money. And so I lived the life that I lived because I did everything right. And so right now, I feel like I'm being resilient. And if everyone else just, followed some similar blueprint, then they would be okay also. So I don't particularly see a problem. My life is fine, and the lives of my family is fine. So I can't identify with what you're saying.
Yeah, I understand that, but how many people actually live that life? Right now, we're picking up hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt for going to college and coming out and flipping burgers at McDonald's because there are no jobs. I mean, it's a nice myth, but it's not a reality. And the older generation believes it because they were the last generation to actually experience it. The younger generation has no such illusion. They know that they have no future,
Well,
and they're clear on it.
Well, that's the thing about as you age, right? You want to hang on as long as you can. Our politicians are quite old, and it's definitely time for them to step down and let new, fresh ideas come in. And so they hold on to those things, and you have the lobbyists that continue to lobby, and it's just there's so many things that need uh, to be changed, but there's so many forces that are keeping the system in place.
It's interesting. I have a lot of conversations with people from all over the world, and I've recently watched a commentator on YouTube. Not something I do, and I'm very selective about who I watch because I like to have real information, not some talking head telling me how the world's supposed to be. And they pointed out something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I have to agree with them. In the United States, we have far right And I think no one's going to argue that the Republican Party has taken a trip to the right that is unprecedented in the last 60 years. And we have the middle and middle right. We don't really truly have a left in this country in the political sense of the word. Um, every industrial country in this world has universal health care. Everyone has universal health care except the United States. The richest country in the world, as you pointed out, is 27th in infant mortality of all of the industrial countries in the world. 27th. It's kind of appalling, but it's also a wake up call for the fact that we believe in a lot of mythology. Actually, in the opening scene of the HBO drama, The Newsroom, from a few years ago, there was a diatribe about what makes America great, and the commentator said, "It doesn't make it great." And one of the things he said is, "We lead the world in only three things: people who believe in angels, number of people incarcerated per capita,
Mm,
and defense spending, where we spend more than 26 other countries combined,
wow.
who most of whom are our allies." I checked out the stats on that. It's absolutely correct. I don't know about the believing in angels, but um, and I tend to unkindly think, that just means delusional. Okay, I get that. People who believe in things that aren't true and aren't real, and we see that every single day. And they're told things that aren't true. I mean, across the board. Actually, I've got a line in this update that talks about no one's going to save you, not politicians, not corporations, not space aliens, not anything. We have to do this for ourselves. And it's really the heart of the report is we have to bring people together. That's really the mission of resilient ecosystems through projects like the Kitsap Resiliency Project, is to bring people together and get them in conversation and bring them together and empower them to make changes.
So let me ask you this, Mark. Uh, just continuing down this line of conversation. The folks that I spoke about, right? The ones that did everything right. They went to school, they saved, they invested, all these things, and they're like, look, I can be empathetic to the homeless and people that fall on hard times and whatnot, but I also see it as a zero sum game where if I would like them to do better, but not at the cost of me having to give something up or give something away.
I
So
get
how
it.
how do we how do we how do we appeal to those folks? Because those are the folks that are making the decisions, right? At this point in time, how do we appeal to them, whether it's a zero sum game or not? That ultimately it's in their best interest, because things like climate change isn't doing that, right? Because that does affect them.
Yep.
So the water, the food, it all either indirectly or really directly affects them, and then they don't see it, right? But if you look at it as a zero sum game, what am I going to have to give up here? Do I give up my vacation home? Do I have to downsize to a smaller home? Do I need to take a pay cut? I don't want to do any of those things. I work damn hard. So, what's the answer there? What's your thoughts?
Well, the answer is a question. All of
Mm,
those things that you talked about,
mhm,
what do I have to give up? That's a direct pointer to insecurity.
mhm,
So let's talk about it. I mean, I recently had somebody come back at me who was one of the people I let pre-read the update, and they said, you don't talk about the people being greedy. You don't talk about them. All the negative things we think about the 1%, the 10%. And I had to stop and think about that, and I don't. And I did that very much on purpose. I don't tend to slap labels on people because I find labels to be a little daunting. We put ourselves in these silos, we put other people in these silos, and none of it is true, because when you actually get to know the situation or learn more information, you have to change the way you think. It's amazing how often we try and stop ourselves from learning more information or learning new information. But going back to the insecurity, and I'm going to tie this straight back. The more people have, the less they want to give. That's just, we all know this. When corporations and rich people give, it's a fraction of the amount that they could give, and it's usually marketed really well to make them look really good, but it doesn't do a whole lot to fix the problems. Now, there's two arguments I have here. One is, first of all, you have to, not argument, but an understanding. You have to think of these people as broken, not greedy, not evil. You have to think of them as broken because they are so afraid of not having enough that it's never enough. It will never be enough. They acquire because they don't have a core belief that they can do what they need to do, that they are who they are. And especially if they're born into it, they have had no trials or things to overcome to give them the security to know that they are okay. Their bonds with their parents, their bonds with their family, their bonds with society are broken. That they are less than human, not because they're evil, but because they're broken and they don't have those connections. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm following you. I'm just, I'm taking it in.
Okay. So if you think of it that way, you have a much greater understanding of why we are the way we are. People who follow the playbook of acquisition do it because they're broken, and they get this because they want security, and they will never be secure because the real security is inside of them, and they don't have it. They break bonds with everybody around them. Well, they never had bonds with anybody around them because that would help them feel more secure, because in our relationships is our strength. So if you think of things that way, you start to understand why it is that people who are impoverished and have overcome things, and or people that have to overcome constantly, are more willing to give and more willing to reach out and more able to connect. Now, the second half of this, they think that the people who are broken and acquired are trying to become secure, and some fraction of them, believe that their money will protect them from whatever happens. They also are all thinking about this because they have broken bonds. They are all thinking that it's only them. They don't think about the other people doing it. They don't think about the long-term consequences because they can't see beyond their need for security. Okay. And all of their followers and people who are gaining money from them are all on that same track. Okay. So if you think of things like that, you realize that they don't get that when it collapses, and it's going to, they're going to go down with the rest of us. Climate change doesn't care about their wealth. It doesn't care about their bunker in Utah. It doesn't care about their Cayman Island resort that they are going to retreat to. So let's paint a picture. I'm just going to play a scenario out.
Go ahead.
You're rich guy X. Things are looking bad, so you go to the missile silo you purchased in Utah or wherever, Kansas, whatever, and you go and live in your silo with all of your food and your retinue that comes with you and everything, and it really hits the fan, and there is no more market. You're not getting any more money because it hit the fan and people can't buy anything. And the manufacturing plants are closed down because the people are hurting so bad, and it's like, a horrible time. How long do you think it's going to be before the people you brought with you to support you are going to turn on you?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on who that person is in the silo and how much,
They don't have anything. There's no money they can offer. They can only offer the food that they've got that's locked up, and they're sharing with their retinue, one assumes. But the retinue is eventually going to go, hell, I'm in here with him, and he's got all the food, and he's useless, and we're all making it. That's the thinking that's going to happen. So what benefit is it to the person to have that? I mean, there is no good answer, and you can't do it alone. So they're broken. How do you convince them? Some of them you're never going to convince because they're broken. But everybody else you can convince to work together to change the system, and the people that are at the top of the system now might become irrelevant.
Mm. Well, and I'll speak from my own experience because, the person you're describing, or the people you're describing is me. I was that person, right? I mean, this was my domestication. This was how I was raised, right? You go to school, you get good grades, you go to college, you get a career, you save your money, you invest, you do all these things, and you secure yourself and your family and make sure that you can retire and live a life that you want. But I was also one of those people that, lived without and had a hard life. And so you're very accurate in, I do have a heart of giving and service. And I think part of the answer comes into what you were saying before, in the whole premise of the puzzle piece, right? When when they're not forced to come to the table, they're more likely to bring their piece more graciously. And so for me to kind of give up my career, uh, uh, and give up, utilizing the degrees. And I'm one of the ones that has a bunch of student loans. I could probably have a nice little Tesla, which I love. But I have dedicated my life to a life of service, but that's because it's a choice. It's not forced on me. I understand what other people are going through. I'm empathetic and sympathetic, having gone through many of those things myself. And so I've restructured my life in a way that I can give back. And when I found out that it's actually more rewarding spiritually, and just as just as a way to exist, to live my life in this way. I tell people, I very rarely set an alarm because I look forward to waking up the next day and making an impact on the world in a positive way and trying to improve the lives of the people around me. And so I
Same.
think that is the way. And so while in some ways, yes, it is a zero sum game, because that means I have to forego, going on vacation 2 or 3 times a year, and maybe not being able to put my daughter into every activity that she could participate in, and doing all the fun things that I want to do. But what I've done is I've shifted my value set and the things that I find important, and I've found purpose in that, and that's helped me to reframe my life in a more um, rewarding way, right? I accumulated a lot of things. I've owned a 5 bedroom, 3 bath house, 3,000 square feet. I could buy whatever I wanted. I've had that life, and that life is great. Don't get me wrong. But there was something that was still empty about it. And you do become aware of the people that are suffering around you. And, it doesn't mean that you're going to open up your house and there's 50 people sleeping on your floor, but there are things that you can do that does mean it's going to take from your pool, and whatever that is, your time, right? Your human capital, that you're going to leverage to make an impact on other people's lives. So I am that person that you're talking about, and that was the answer for me, and why I feel I'm able to bring my piece to the table in that way, and then try to innovate and do things and try to draw others into us, whatever that may be, whether it's RESECO or G2, or making an impact in their own communities.
We very much like to think of it as inviting people to the table. We don't want to coerce anybody. If you're coercing somebody, you're not going to get their participation, and you're not certainly not going to get their puzzle piece. So we do that. And I do want to ask you a question, and we're running out of time, and there are a couple of things I wanted to hit on, hit before we head out. But did you really have to give up anything that was meaningful to you in the long run? I'm curious. I really am.
I would say yes, and this is just an off the cuff answer. And the yes is, there are things that I wish that I could do more freely that I'm not able to do, right? I'm not able to spend money in a, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say in a thoughtless way.
An
Uh,
awful manner.
well, so I would tell my students this, when I was teaching at the college. When I was a student, I could put $2 in the tank, or put $5 in the tank, and get to the next place or the place after that, and then I'll figure it out once I get there, right? I'll figure out where I get more money in a day or two or whatever. or I'm going to limit where I go because that's all I can do. And I would tell my students, I'm like, look, it doesn't matter what the price of gas is. When I go to the gas tank, I fill it up. I'm not putting in $10. I'm not putting in $7. I can put in the premium and squeeze the trigger. Now I might look at it and say, oh, $60 for a tank of gas. That's what it is right now. And say, man, that's expensive. But it's no skin off my nose. Right. And so I'm in a different place. And so that said, yes, there is something that I'm giving away because there are things that I used to do and that I still enjoy doing that I'm not able to do. I have to be more cognizant of that. I may need to save for that or forego that. Again, I'm in a process of um, changing my value set, right? And there is self-care, and you still need to do some things for yourself. Like right now, I probably could really use a professional massage. And in all honesty, I probably should have that as a regular staple in my life. And there was a time when I did. But that's not sustainable for me to pay for that and the chiropractor and which is what I used to do. So yes, yeah, I do think that there are some things that I'm actually giving away to live this life. Yes.
Yep, and it's true. But you also, I heard very clearly, had a youth of overcoming putting a couple bucks in the tank and knowing that you were could be okay. That level of security for a lot of people doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm talking about is people who are broken who've never had to struggle, never had to look at that. And a lot of people, I mean, what was it, the recent article? I think you asked me about it the other day. People interviewed going into one of the Ivy League colleges thinking that the average income was $800,000 a year.
I mean, incredible, incredible. We actually have someone in the chat here. Shout out to Cynthia. Time. That is the most important thing you have given up because that is something you cannot get back. Helping others comes from gratitude for the blessings you have been freely given, and that could be anything.
Yep.
Very, very true statement. And it really is for me. It's been this slow, and this is an ongoing process. I have not arrived at the end. I think this is going to be a journey until I'm on the other side and seeing what's next. But
that the other day is life is a journey and it doesn't end in this iteration until your toes are up.
Yeah, so I'm constantly trying to improve myself from a professional and a personal standpoint, learn more about what's important to me, why things should be important, investigating other things, learning what's important to other people, and then trying to change my value set as I go along. So definitely not in a perfect place, a lot of work to do, and I consistently and constantly work on that on a daily basis, for sure.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we didn't get to a whole lot of the report, and I know you've got a page of questions there.
Yeah, that I was working at 3 a.m. on. So,
I know that next week we're talking about the showing up article, but why don't we schedule a return to this for the week after next?
Yeah, that's perfect for sure. So we'll revisit this in 2 weeks. Hopefully that will give you an opportunity, everyone out there, to go ahead and read it. It's a good read. It's an engaging read. As I said, I couldn't sleep. I woke up at about 2:30 this morning and got into it and came up with a page of questions, and I'd only gotten halfway through it. So it's a great piece, food for thought, to get you to start considering, what's happening, maybe starting to identify what your puzzle piece is, and then trying to figure out how you can bring it to bear to the table. And I am looking forward to asking you a myriad of questions because I do want to hear your opinion on things. You do a really good job of trying to remove yourself from this. As you say, it's not about you, it's about, everyone else. But there are some questions in that regard, and I enjoy the discussions with you on the nuances of government and politics, because that's something, again, for me growing up, I didn't care about that. As a as a teenager and as a very young adult, I didn't vote, didn't matter. I had no vested interest in that. I had this idea that, it didn't really matter what you did. The game is rigged. And I hear that from a lot of adults, from people that are older than me, my same age and younger. And so I'm just out here living my life. And I've got so many things that are going on in my life. I don't even have time to consider that. And what's so strange is that's almost the trick, right? And there's lots of sayings, right? The greatest lie the devil ever told was that he doesn't exist, or put
Yep.
something in a book because no one will ever look for it there. And it's like making people feel like they have no power or they don't belong in the space of making policy or making laws is really the trick, right? We're so much more powerful than we are. There's so many more of us than the few that hold these positions, that if we just change our gaze and say, you know what, we should actually be making the decisions here, we could change this thing around in probably, I'd say probably a decade or less.
Yeah. Would you say that everybody has a puzzle piece to bring to the table to make a future?
Yeah, absolutely.
They
Absolutely.
just have to be empowered to do so.
Absolutely. And you know what's so interesting, meeting you and joining resilient ecosystems, when you think of, the whole premise of us talking about puzzle pieces and gather together, grow together, it's saying the exact same thing, right? You gather together and then you grow together and you build a puzzle together. So it's you can draw people to yourself, or people will be drawn to you. And if you can find ways to get synergy and synergize, then you can come together and really make some impacts in the community. So yeah, I appreciate it for sure.
Yeah. Just remember, we the people. Yeah. You hear a lot of politicians talking about what our forefathers wanted. They wrote a document where the first three words were "we the people."
Well,
That says pretty much all you need to know about what the forefathers were thinking.
we're gonna go ahead and make that the last word. I don't think there's anything else to say. Again, we will be back next Wednesday at 12 p.m. So make sure that you don't miss. Please subscribe, like, and share. For Mark, I am Marwan. This is the Conduit. We will see you next week. All right, everyone.